He was known as God in the weighing room. He was the best of competitors.
One of the great jockeys of all time.
Pat was a jockey's jockey.
And a nice person too, a lovely person.
Never seen a stronger jockey in the saddle.
It's all Silver Patriarch and Pat Eddery now. Win number 4,000 in Britain for Pat Eddery, and the ledger goes to Silver Patriarch.
But it's Dancing Brave now who's come to take up the running. Dancing Brave is going to go out. Dancing Brave is going to win at the post. Dancing Brave from Bearing Sheriff started kicking. England Super Filly Pebbles has won it. And Pebbles saving every bit of ground. Pat Eddery, a daring move at the top of the stretch.
Pat Eddery arrived in the world in 1952. He was the son of Jimmy Eddery, but was he bred to ride horses?
My father was a jockey. He was a good rider. He was leading jockey in Ireland. He rode for Seamus McGrath, who was, they owned it, Water for Crystal. He was a good rider, but he was a little bit rough.
In the saddle?
In the saddle. He was, you know, those days the cameras weren't as good as they are now, and you know, he was quite tough, and he'd knock anybody over.
Right.
But he retired at a young age. I think the jockey club made him retire.
So they pensioned him off effectively
Yeah.
for being too mean on the track.
Yeah, but yeah, but he was a tough man. Sadly, he died at 64. But he was a good rider. There's no doubt about that.
And you were brought up in Newbridge in County Kildare, is that
Yeah.
right?
And then when I was 14, I moved over to England and started working for Frenchy Nicholson.
But prior to that, you'd been with a chap, I think, called Seamus McGrath at Glencairn, is that what?
Yeah.
Did Seamus sort of bring you along?
Well, I used to go up there every time I had a break from school, because I started riding ponies when I was 4. Then I was 8. I started riding the racehorses, and that was the Seamus McGraths. And I was apprenticed to him, but I had my first ride for him at the Curragh, and it finished stone bunking last.
True time, yeah.
Yeah, 3 time. And then I mentioned to my mum, you know, like, I want to go to England. And luckily, Frenchy Nicholson was the top apprentice man at the time. He had Paul Cook, Tony Murray, quite a few good jockeys. Mm. And he was both flat and jumping. So I moved over to Cheltenham.
To give a put as a timescale, I think Seamus, you had that first ride for him, true time, in about 67.
67.
And then came over here, 68, to join Frenchy, who of course was the father of David Nicholson. A lot of people
yeah.
know.
He was a lovely man to work for. Very, very tough. But I really enjoyed my years with him.
And I think you had your first ride in England, ironically, at Aintree, which was a flat track in those days, on a horse called Dido's Dowry. Does that sound familiar?
For Tim Maloney.
Yeah. Tom Maloney.
Tom Maloney,
Tom Maloney, yeah.
Anyway, yeah, and it was a tape start. And you know, them old tapes. Anyway, she took off with me before the race, straight into the bloody tape. I came off. Anyway, luckily she didn't run away too far, and got her back, and I rode her in the race, yeah. That was my first ride there.
And had you, from a very early age, you say you're riding ponies, was it just accepted you were going to become a jockey because Dad was, so to speak?
Well, no, it was just that I felt that I just wanted to ride horses.
Right.
I didn't want to go to school.
You just absolutely loved it?
Yeah, I loved it.
Inside the final furlong, Colour Spin touches the front now from Fleur Royale, and they've left Untold a long way behind them as they race inside the final furlong. Pat Eddery is going to win this in a canter. Colour Spin coming home in front of Fleur Royale, and they're a good 12 lengths clear of Untold as they race up to the line. Colour Spin wins the Giltown Stud Irish Oaks. Fleur Royale is second.
What about your style? Because obviously you've got a very individual style in the end. Mm. When you were riding then, was the old bottom bouncing up and down in those days?
I was a bit more higher in the saddle in those days. But my style was totally different than anybody else's. I didn't copy anybody.
And why was that? Was that just the way you felt comfortable in the saddle?
It was, yeah. It was the way I felt comfortable. But when I was a young boy, in my sort of like 14, 15, I used to work with Bill Williamson, and I just thought he was a great jockey. He was an Australian, brilliant rider, rode a lot of big winners in Ireland and England, also in Australia, and I modelled myself quite a bit on him.
Right. And did he do the bottom thing?
So slightly, yeah.
And what does that give you? Does that give you extra strength, propulsion? Why did that work?
I don't know why it worked, Matt, because...
presumably people must have said to you from time to time, no one else does this, Pat.
But in a race, when you're out there, I never felt I was doing it.
So you're 17 years old. A month after your 17th birthday, you have your first winner, very aptly at Epsom, on a horse called Alvaro, I think.
Well, I was very fortunate because Major Pope, who trained him, he bought him out of Ian Balding's yard. The horse was apparently a crib biter.
Right.
And he worked on it.
That basically means that it wobbles around its box, doesn't it?
Well, no, he grabs hold of the door and just sucks in wind.
Right.
And then he rang Frenchie, and anyway, I got this ride at Epsom on this horse that just previously won an amateur race, and it won on the bridle. It just bolted up. My first ride at Epsom, over 1.5 miles on the Derby course.
As a stable lad riding horses, in races, is that you weren't like a big name obviously at this stage?
Oh no, I mean as soon as one had a ride in a race, say like Bath or somewhere, it's not far from Cheltenham, Frenchie, my boss, would drive me back, do evening stables, and then go home.
But was the Eddery name then, were people looking out for you because Jimmy had been champion jockey, or were you just a young lad trying to make his way?
Well, no, Major Pope gave me the big break because he put me on that horse, and he won, for me anyway, he won 5 on the bounce. And then I rode an old handicapper for him at Royal Ascot, a horse called Skyrocket.
Right.
And
he won the Woking.
He won the Woking.
Yeah.
And then after that, things went really good.
Well, of course, soon after that, you were going to join Peter Warwin.
Well, I rode for Jeff Barling first.
Did you? Right. Okay.
Yeah, as an apprentice. He was a good trainer in Newmarket.
Right.
And then while I was with Jeff Barling, Duncan Keith was the jockey for Peter Warwin.
Right.
And he had serious weight problems. And he gave up halfway through the season. And then I started riding for Peter Warwin.
So that was sort of 72, 73 that he sort of discovers you. And very soon after that, of course, Grundy comes along.
Well, I'd been there from half of the season of that year when Duncan had to retire because of weight problems. And then the next year, all of a sudden, you got good horses. Grundy, and then there was good Royal Ascot winners, and Peter Warwin at the time was training, he was a good trainer and trained a lot of winners.
We'll talk about the horses later on, but the characters, Peter Warwin, tell us what it's like to work for Peter Warwin.
Well, he was great. He was really great. I mean, Pete and Bunk, his wife, were great fun.
It's hard not to laugh, isn't it?
Yeah, I just had a wonderful time with them, and I was very fortunate. I rode a lot of winners out of 7 barrows for them as well. Mm. But they still are great people,
But you hear all sorts of stories of trainers and jockeys. I mean, is Peter one who, Eddery's on the gallops and he's screaming and shouting at you, you lose a race, possibly you should have won?
He never used to scream and shout at me, but he did at other people, yeah. But he used to. I used to cry laughing sometimes. It was funny, and it was great.
In what ways?
Well, it was lovely to go down there and ride work, and then come in after first lot for breakfast because it was great fun, and he would invite lots of his friends, and you know, it was all good fun, all good fun.
So, as far as your life is concerned, as a picture, this is a very happy time for you at Pete.
Great time. I mean, I had 8 years with Pete, and there were 8 good years.
And there were to be another sort of 5 or 6 good years as retained to Robert Sangster from after Peter War, when you stayed with him until the 80s.
Yeah.
81, 86.
Oh, I was riding horses that they were buying for $1 million at the time, and that was in the early 80s.
How did it come about? Did you get a phone call from Robert saying, "Pat, I need you," or how
No,
does this
I got what I can remember, it was a phone call from John Magner.
Right.
And I went over to Ireland, and I saw John and Vincent and Robert, and it escalated from there. And then I started riding for him in the early 80s.
And tell us about that sort of group of people: Magnier, Vincent OBrien, Sangster. I mean, it's almost like a sort of all mafia group of trainers, sort of thing. I mean, how tense, how pressurised is it riding for that kind of organisation?
Well, Vincent was very good to me. I got on really well with him, and the 5 years I had with him was really, I enjoyed it, because I was riding lovely horses, was meeting a lot of nice people. John Magner was great to me. You know, he's a very generous man. He never put any pressure on me, and neither did Vincent. And Robert, you know what Robert's like. He enjoyed himself. He played around and had lots of parties, and I didn't see much of him in the 5 years, only at the races.
Right. And would Vincent, you've got a classic coming up, say, would Vincent be a man who would sit you down and you go through the race in great depth, or does he just leave it to you? How does it work?
The great thing about him is people probably thought he was very, you know, serious of tactics and all that, but he wasn't. He left it to me. Right. I mean, when I rode Golden Fleece in the Derby, he never said a word to me before the race. Even El Gran Senor. But, you know, one got beat.
We'll come to that, don't worry, Pat. But, and so, I mean, you're a trainer now. Does it seems to me from what you're saying is then his job was just training the horses. Your job was riding them, and it doesn't seem as though you talked that much, bringing the two bits together, so to say.
Well, he had great staff, you know, which, you know, obviously I haven't got the staff that he had. They were great guys, those blokes that he had down there, and also he trained them great.
And what makes you say that?
Because
what was good about it? What was so special?
I don't know. He was just. He just had something different.
And is that almost? I mean, what we're doing is struggling to put words to what was special. Is that because it literally is almost just his eye, in that he just saw things that the average person wouldn't see?
I'm pretty certain there was something there that he had, and you know, it's like some great men that are in sport or whatever. You know, they just got that knack, haven't they?
And how much did gambling play a part for these people? Because, you know, in the modern era, you always wonder.
He did. I don't think he gambled. I mean, I've never spoke to him ever about gambling.
Presumably Robert had a few.
But I'm pretty certain. Yeah, I mean, probably Robert gambled.
Would you ever know if?
No.
Never.
I never knew. I was never spoken to by Robert or John Magner or Vincent OBrien or any of the team that they were gambling on a if they're entitled to have a gamble, aren't they?
Yeah.
But I never knew.
And we always wonder, particularly in the past, I think it's much harder these days. But, you know, were jockeys, do you get the odd little present? Does Robert go up to you after the races and say, Pat, here's a little...
Do you know, I rode for Robert. He paid me very well, but I never got a present of him. Right. I got my retainer.
Right, which was a pretty decent...
It was a good retainer, and also, you know, the shares in the horses as well.
Well, that's an interesting part, because we don't hear about that much in the modern era, but certainly in the past. What did you... If you rode a Group 1 winner, you got a stallion
share.
percentage, did you?
Yeah.
What stallions did you get, Pat? Sadler's Wells.
No, there was. He was the same year as El Gran Senor.
Yeah.
And El Gran Senor was rated 20-something pounds above him, so I took him.
Than Sadler's Wells.
No, I didn't take. I was only allowed one.
Right. So you took El Gran instead of.
Yeah, and he was infertile.
Right.
Killer, wasn't
What
it?
a mistake to make.
Wow, a terrible
That must
mistake.
go down in the history of the sport as one of the biggest mistakes ever.
Oh,
you
yeah.
took infertile El Gran Senor instead of one of the greatest stallions of all time.
Yeah.